whether Republicans are going to indulge President Trump in what he has been saying about raising questions about the validity of this counting. And it seems like there are more people lining up behind Pat Toomey, who you talked to this morning.
The senator from Pennsylvania,
the senator from Pennsylvania, right, who came out and who said it was really hard to watch the president's remarks last night, and who said, you know, if you've got evidence, bring it to the courts.
Well, you know, Mitch McConnell, the Republican, of course, highly influential Republican senator, put out a statement today. I thought it was interesting because he didn't go as far as Pat Toomey did, the Republican from Pennsylvania, who said that was hard to watch. There is just not a scintilla of evidence that there's anything afoot, that there's any widespread fraud. And if you got evidence, come to court and prove it. Is basically the upshot of what Senator Toomey said.
Right.
Then you have on the other side of the spectrum folks like the Republican leader in the House, Kevin McCarthy, who was circling the wagons around President Trump and suggesting, as the president has, that this election has been taken unfairly from the president. Seemed like Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, was playing it right down the middle.
Right. Well, Mitch McConnell, it's entirely possible, we don't know yet because we don't know control of the Senate, but Mitch McConnell could be looking at being one of the two most important people running the country here in a couple of months. And he, I think, is proceeding accordingly. And that message that he put out, he wrote a tweet that said, trust the process. And he used some of the words that President Trump has been throwing out there about transparency and illegal votes or legal votes. But at the end of the day, the fundamental message that he sent was trust the process. That is also the message that the Biden campaign is sending. They are saying, trust the process. And, you know, they are not yet out publicly really popping champagne corks. I mean, they're being very careful. They are going out of their way to defer to that process. And for McConnell, you know, that's sending a signal that, okay, the Republican Party, we know for President Trump, if he becomes a former president, is still going to be hugely influential in the Republican Party. But there are also going to be a lot of Republicans in government who are going to need to work potentially with the Biden administration. And to figure out how to make sure that they still have influence, they have to figure out how to balance that. And I read Mitch McConnell's statement as a signal to his troops to say, hey, let's wait a minute. Let's figure out if there's actually a path here, and then let's focus on the task at hand.
You know, it's interesting, Casey, you brought that up. I noticed last night the National Association of Manufacturers, which is a trade group that would vigorously say they're nonpartisan and all this stuff, but there's been certainly the members, I think there's certainly a lot of Republican-friendly members in that trade association. They put out a very strongly worded statement that said, Americans are hard at work counting the ballots and tallying the votes. That is our democratic process, has served us well throughout the history. Manufacturers have faith in our institutions, and all valid ballots must be counted. And it sort of goes to what you're saying, Casey, is that there are plenty of people who have jobs in Washington whose job is to work with the government on behalf of their members or on behalf of their constituents. And this is what you may start to see over the next couple of days, and the president's going to find out he may be on an island. And you're going to have a lot of sort of the professional class of Washington start to realize.
He's not alone on that island, though. You have Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader in the House. You have Lindsey Graham, who just was reelected in the Senate from South Carolina, circling the wagons around President Trump. So it's just interesting to see the different camps and the spectrum of Republican response to what the president is alleging here.
Well, and think about Kevin McCarthy. He's the top leader in the House. What's happened in the House? Republicans don't control it, which means they're in opposition. Also, we've seen that there is going to be a contingent of potentially more moderate members of the House, but the driving dynamic there, it is full of people who rabidly support President Trump and who are going to continue to be a part of that movement. So Kevin McCarthy is thinking about how he's going to manage that group of people. And, you know, we get down into the weeds pretty quickly with that, but it helps explain what's going on. And I do think there's going to be a reckoning and a lot of conflict between these two wings of the Republican Party. And we've seen it start to play out, and I think it's going to continue.
Let's head to Pennsylvania, where Biden has a razor-thin lead. Stephanie Gosk is there. Hey, Steph.
Hey, Hoda, you know, there was a time during presidential elections that the mantra was Florida, Florida, Florida. Well, very clearly today, during this election, it's Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania. A little harder to say, especially with a mask on. But that's where we are right now. There is scrutiny here on this state, not just from within the state, but from the country and perhaps the world right now. And you have to wonder, when you look at that live camera shot of those poll workers processing those mail-in ballots, whether or not they feel some of that pressure. Officials in this state have been saying all along they would not sacrifice accuracy for speed. Now, there may be a lot of questions when all this is over whether or not they should have had more people, better infrastructure to have this process go faster. But it is not a surprise that they are here, that we are here waiting for these votes. In fact, the governor of this state, Tom Wolf, actually made a commercial in the weeks building up to the election that said, this is going to take a while. Be patient. It's going to take a few days. And that's exactly what is happening. Now, let's talk a little bit about the numbers. You've got about 20,000 or so votes still to come out of Philadelphia. You have in the suburbs, you also have, by our estimate right now, in the neighborhood of 17,000, maybe 20,000. We just spoke with an official in Bucks County. That was the latest county to deliver some of those votes. They've got about 7,000 outstanding votes that'll come around midday or so. And in the end of the day, today, there will still be outstanding votes. Allegheny County will likely be a place that still is counting these mail-in votes, and it will be a question of margins. How quickly does that margin build up? How big does Joe Biden's lead become over the course of the day? Guys, back to you.
All right, Stephanie, thank you. Let's go over to the White House. Peter Alexander there. Are you hearing anything from inside the Trump campaign right now?
Well, we know that the president is paying close attention to what's happening in Pennsylvania right now. He tweeted a matter of moments ago that he is watching Fox Business Channel, one of the channels where some of his conservative allies have often touted many of the president's own opinions, quoting them saying that Philadelphia has a rotten history of voter fraud there. And Larry Kudlow, one of the president's financial advisors here, economic advisors in the White House, was just speaking moments ago to our colleagues at CNBC on television, saying that he spoke to the president this morning and that the president, in his words, quote, intends to fight. He also said something interesting. Kudlow said, I think there will be a peaceful transfer of power. This is the greatest country in the world, and we abide by the rule of law, as will the president. That's striking that Kudlow would say that, because you'll remember only a matter of weeks ago we were talking about the president's own refusal to commit to a peaceful transfer of power. He said he would commit to one if it was fair. He said it wouldn't be necessary, though, because he would win. The question now, though, as we witness the trajectory of this race is who's in a position in this White House to communicate to the president the situation, what it looks like right now, the very real possibility that ultimately Joe Biden will be declared the next president of the United States. A source close to the White House this morning telling us that there's real reluctance, a real challenge in who would have that ability, who would take that task, saying very specifically, apparently no one's willing to tell King Lear the truth. Savannah and Hoda.
All right, Peter Alexander for us there at the White House. Why don't we head over to Joe Biden's headquarters in Delaware, where Kristen Welker's standing by. She's got reaction too. Hey, Kristen.
Hey, Hoda and Savannah. Well, we're getting our first glimpse and insight into what Joe Biden is doing right now. One close aide says that he is patiently watching and waiting for the returns like the rest of us, and he is waiting for the race to be called. This person notes that his first presidential run was back in 1988. He spent 32 years thinking about what it would feel like if he were, in fact, to win. So what's another few hours to wait? So that is how Vice President Biden is approaching this moment, not yet ready to, as we've been reporting throughout the morning, pop the cork, as some of his aides might be want to do. Now, in terms of what we can expect to see or hear from the Vice President, I am told do not expect to hear from him until prime time. So if we do, in fact, hear from him tonight, if there is some type of a call at some point today, we would not see the Vice President until this evening. What themes will he touch on when he addresses the nation? He's going to talk about unity, healing, coming together as a nation. Of course, these are the themes that have really guided his campaign, and so not surprising that he would echo those same themes. And I just go back to this point, the strategy within the Biden campaign, which a number of Democrats were quite critical of. They were concerned he was being too cautious, that he wasn't out on the campaign trail enough. Well, in those final days, He spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania, and now we see why, because this state could be make or break. Of course, no call yet. He's leading, and inside Biden world, they are celebrating the fact that he's pulled ahead in this critical state. Savannah and Hoda.
All right, Kristen, thank you. You know, we are so laser focused on Pennsylvania for good reason. It's absolutely a must win for the president. Joe Biden does have another path. In fact, he doesn't have to win Pennsylvania if he could pick up Arizona and Nevada. And that brings me to Chuck, because it's getting to be morning time over there in Arizona and Nevada. And we are expecting votes this morning, I think 11 o'clock Eastern and 12 o'clock Eastern from Nevada and Arizona. And that might tell the tale as well. That could be interesting.
It could. In fact, I want to take you to Arizona. Our own Vaughn Hilliard down there is reporting that at 9 o'clock Arizona time, which is going to be in about 45 minutes, we expect about 75,000 ballots out of Maricopa. Many of these ballots were mail ballots that were turned in on Election Day. So the question is, Election Day voters. And we know Election Day voters nationally trended heavily towards the president. So the question's going to be, of these 75,000 ballots. So I just want everybody to have some, think about some numbers here. We are looking at, right now, Joe Biden has a 47,000 votes spread. The president needs to win 59% of all the remaining ballots that are to be counted in Arizona. We think it's about I think the last we heard about 280,000.
It was around 280, and 200 of which were from Maricopa County. Yeah.
So this batch of 75,000, let me just, if this margin drops to essentially 33,000 or less, then that batch went really well for the president. He's getting the number that he needs that could get him to the point where we are at a Georgia-like result here. So that's sort of the magic number to see. We're going to have 75,000. Can the president net somewhere around 13 to 14,000 out of there? And that'll tell us. And if he doesn't, that could actually help us statistically decide where this race is headed.
Arizona is very interesting because it's different than Pennsylvania in this. 85% of voters in Arizona vote by mail. Arizona is moving to almost totally vote by mail. So what we're saying in Pennsylvania, which is, hey, these mail-in ballots that are getting counted in Pennsylvania, they're largely favoring Joe Biden. The same cannot really be said of mail-in votes in Arizona, because nearly everybody does. This batch, this leftover batch that's coming from Arizona, besides the provisional ballots,
they're not leftovers. They're not leftovers. The reason I say that
left
is
to be counted.
I don't, people, because you hear politicians say, they found votes, and and I've had people say, we don't mean to say find and all that stuff. That's all. We're all tired.
Leftover in the sense of they haven't been counted yet, but fair enough. Okay, so those ballots that remain to be counted in Arizona, they're people who had a mail-in ballot and decided to walk it in on the day and just they didn't want to take their chances with the mail service. I could make an argument on both sides of that could be a Trump voter who says, the president tells me don't trust these mail-in ballots. There's something fishy going on there. I could also see it being a Biden voter who said, you know what, they're slowing down that mail. I'm going to bring my vote right into the polling place.
One anecdote that I think where I fall on the side of, I think these are going to be Trump voters. Montana was a state that sent ballots to everybody, I believe, and that there was this sort of, and in fact, Republican strategists there, and there was a tight Senate race there, and Democrats were very bullish. They're like, oh, no, we're going to do well in the mail. And they were doing well in the early count, but there was a whole bunch of Republicans that were holding back their ballot. And they couldn't figure out why hadn't they sent their ballot back in. And they were determined to turn their ballot in on Election Day. They weren't going to do it before then. They weren't going to play that. They were going to be Election Day voters. You're telling us to vote by mail? Fine, I'm going to turn that ballot in on Election Day. It was sort of a little bit of a, you want to call it defiance, whatever it is. And oh, by the way, Steve Daines, the Republican senator, I think won by 10 points. So, in the same day voters. So, I'm a gambler. I'll admit it sometimes. I would, if you're wanting to know, I think this first batch will certainly lean Trump. The question is it going to be at that 59% clip? Right. And that is, I think,
and the Arizona ballots that have come in subsequent to Election Day, he has been hitting that margin.
But right at the margin.
Right at the margin.
He's right on that
Very
edge.
Little margin of error.
And I will say that Democrats that I have been talking to throughout this process have maintained throughout that they think Joe Biden is is likely to pull it out, and that that it's likely to be about 20,000 votes in margin. Now, obviously, I mean, we're counting, we're being careful, and Chuck, it's interesting to me that the number you're looking for is a little higher than that.
Yeah.
But for what it's worth, that's what they're expecting. If it were to drop below 20,000,
no, that's just for that first batch, by the way. That's just for that first batch of the 75,000. Okay. We still have about another 200,000 to come in, but that first batch, that's what to watch for to see if he's hitting this number.
Okay,
I don't want.
Fair enough.
That's at the margin I'm projecting.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, if it were to drop,
Vegas.
Yeah, let's go.
Speaking of gambling, let's actually do some gambling, right? Look, we're waiting for some Clark. We heard from the Clark County registrar that we're going to get some processed mail-in ballots from Clark County today.
That's Las Vegas.
And Las Vegas, and some tomorrow that they're going to finish up then. Look, all of this has been trending. This is a case where vote by mail does trend Democratic. Clark County is a lean Democratic county, but the vote by mail has not been lean. It has been decidedly Biden here. In fact, the first small batch that we got yesterday expanded Joe Biden's lead statewide. It was about 7,600, and it went up to 11,000. So this will be a very important batch of ballots that John Lipinski, our Director of Elections, and our team in the boiler room will be looking at, because it could help us recharacterize Nevada today.
And big picture here, if Joe Biden were able to hang on in Arizona and Nevada, at that point he wouldn't need Pennsylvania.
This has been the point.
270.
This has been the point we've been saying all along, right? You know, the president can get his Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, but Nevada plus Arizona gives you 270. And again, the vice president leads in Pennsylvania and in Georgia.
Can you just pop Georgia up one more second? I feel like we haven't looked at that, and I just want to see what's...
Absolutely here. Let's get it up. All right. That margin just over 1,000 votes. And again,
unbelievable.
Just so you know, we think there's 8,000 vote by mails out there, approximately, maybe less. We think there's a maximum of another 8,000 military ballots and overseas ballots that have to be in. I don't know if it's 5 p.m. today, but have to arrive today. I assume 5 p.m. most states, that's when they end their day.
It was
5 p.m., a business day. That we don't think there's going to be all 8,000. One projection I saw said, you know, don't be surprised if it's less than half of the 8,000 ballots that get returned on time. And you can't assume those are all the military and overseas ballots are going to somehow lean one party or the other. This is rank and file military. You don't know if they grew up in Fulton County or if they grew up in a Republican county, right? So you just don't know. The point is, this is margin of error stuff. I think maximum, neither candidate could have a lead more than of maybe 3,000 or 4,000 votes.
But that's recount territory there, isn't it?
Easily recount territory. Yeah. By the way, the question is, do you ask for the recount if you can't get to 270? So, you know, I don't assume there's going to be a recount here.
Well, except for that, it hasn't every signal been from the Trump campaign is a scorched earth legal strategy.
So just do everything anyway?
Hit it everywhere we can. And I mean, that makes sense. They got to take their shots where they can get them and hope that it all adds up to something.
It does. The only question that I have about that is, we're heading for a pair of recounts in Georgia in the Senate races that will likely determine control of the chamber. And so that means there's a lot on the line. If they were to do a recount that were to adjust that race so that, you know, it could go one or the other direction. There's a risk for either candidate in asking for that. And David Perdue, the senator in Georgia, is actually very close to President Trump, so I'm sure that they're talking a lot about it.
But just to be clear, and correct me if I'm wrong, if the president were to pursue a recount in Georgia, that doesn't mean that the Senate races get recounted too.
Not necessarily. That's right. So all I'm saying is that I think there will be coordination on that, and there will be a major push from Republicans to make sure that the Georgia results are not unnecessarily called into question. If that makes sense.
When they do a recount, is it they just put it right back in the machines